So in the last episode, I talked about variables, global and local variables. If you don't know what those are, go watch my video. I'm not re-explaining it. So I'm gonna make this video is gonna be specifically about conditionals, right? So I'm gonna make a variable. It's gonna be called var1. I'm gonna make another variable called var2. So the var1 will equal 1 and var2 will equal 2. And I'm just gonna make a simple conditional called if var1, then print var1, right? This will run because var1 exists. var1 is 1, right? Now, if I were to set if not var1, right? So this is an example of a logical operator, right? So we're checking to see, hey, it if var1 exists, right, it will return false because it's saying, hey, does this not exist? This is literally saying if this is false, if this is true, right, then it's false because not. If not true, then we run the conditional. Otherwise, if it is false, we do run the conditional, right? Var, if not, var1, so if not true, we don't run it. If not false, which means true because we're saying the opposite of what the thing is, it'll run it. So to elaborate on that, if I were to go var1 equals no, right? Since this is false, it doesn't exist, it'll run because if not false, then it's true. Say we see no. So pretty much the not operator or the not logical operator will always return true or false regardless of the situation. Any use, it'll always return true or false. And if it doesn't, you probably just broke Lua. Hate to say it. What else? So if you do not true, then it's false. If you do not false, it's true. That's basically how you remember what not is. That's basically how that works. If I were to remove the not and just put if var1, it's going to say it's false because, right, var1 doesn't exist. It's the same thing. It's the same concept as saying this, right? It doesn't print because it doesn't exist. But if I put 1 here, it exists. So now it's true, right? It does exist. I could also say true. Same concept. It'll print true, which is a boolean, right? So now we know what the not logical operator does. Well, I'm going to show you what other things you can do. So we'll do if not var1, we'll print not here. Otherwise, we're going to use an else. We're going to use the else statement to say, okay, so if not var, so if var exists, we're going to print it exists, right? So we're going to go ahead and run this function and see our script and see what happens. It says it exists because we're saying, okay, this is false, right? Because var1 exists. So now we're going to go down the line and check, okay, so he has an else here, which is saying if this is false, so if the conditional is false, we can't run the first conditional statement. If it is false, we will run the next conditional statement because it's saying else. So if I set something to true, then I'll run it. Else, or if not true, basically, then I'll run the else statement. So that is how else works. It's literally just the exact opposite of what the first conditional states, basically. So now if I were to do something else, I could do else if, which means else with if. So else if var2, then we can print var2, right? What this will allow us to do is say, okay, so if var1 doesn't exist, if var doesn't exist, we can't say it's not here. Else if var2 exists, then we'll print var2. And then we can do another else if and do else if var1, then we can print var1. Right? Now if we run it, it'll say var2 because var2 exists, right? This is literally saying if this is false, then we'll run this. Else if this is true, then we'll run this. Else if this is true, we'll run this. And then if everything else above this is false, we will run this, right? So if I were to show this in action, I can do print error, right? So if I were to set this to no, and then set this to no, it'll print error because none of them exist. Oh yeah, that's right, because it's firing the first conditional. So I'll do this. I'll do and not var2, right? We'll use that logical operator. So now we say, yeah, that's right. I can't do it like that. So I'll have to set, the way it's working is it'll never reach this. Oh, I could do and false. Yeah. So if I do and false, this is just saying this is another logical operator saying and. So it's like this will include the next statement. So if A and B and C, then we'll run the conditional. This is saying, okay, so if this doesn't exist and this doesn't exist and it's false, right? Which it'll never be false. False is an automatic. If you put false at the end of any conditional, it will never run, just because of the fact that false conditionals only run if it's true, right? So if I did not false, then it would run and say not here, right? Because this is true. However, if I were to remove the not, this is false, and it doesn't run because it's false. And then we skip, okay, so this doesn't exist, and then we go ahead and print error. I could also do else if false here, and then it won't print anything, right? Because this is false. And like I mentioned, conditionals only work if the condition is true. It doesn't print anything because everything is false. Now if I were to put not false, again, this is true, so it'll run error. Now there's another conditional called or. So if I were to do this, I could go if var1 or var2, then I'll make a new variable localized inside. This will be localized inside of this conditional. You will only be able to access this inside of this conditional. If you try to index it outside or call it outside, it will error because it's a nil, right? That's what I talked about when localized environmental towards this conditional environment. So we'll do local var3 equals var1 or var2. So if this is false, then we'll go into this one. And if this is false, then it'll just be nil. Now if we print var1, or if we print var3, watch what happens. It'll say 1, right? Because it says, okay, this var1 is nil. And if var1 is nil, we'll go ahead and check the next one. So if false, or we'll get the next variable. So in this case, variable var2 is 1, so it gets 1 is the third variable. Now if I were to do this, right, if I were to change this to 5, right, both conditions are true. So it chooses 5 because this is what is called first, right? So var1 or var2. Now if I were to change this to var2 and this to var1, it'll print 1 because var1 is called first, right? Because var1 or var2 is equal to 1. That is conditionals. That is literally all conditionals are. Any questions, DM me on Discord.